Hi everybody, this week I'm going to be talking a bit about gendered language. I try to be really deliberate in my word choice about how I refer to things, how I construct phrases and stuff in my speech. Part of that involves my use of gendered language. So in English, a lot of our words and phrases are gendered, and we may not think about that because, we say these words all the time, we may not question them. One thing that I do a lot that I'm trying to change is I refer to groups of people as you guys. That's the plural of you that I have grown up using, and that is really deeply ingrained in me. I am aware that not everybody in the room that I'm addressing is a guy, or is even okay with being called a guy. And because of the society that we live in, having male-centric terms like that isn't perceived as weird. Whereas if I were to walk into a group full of people who are of multiple genders and I said, "Hey, ladies," a lot of the men in the room would object. One thing that gets my nerves a lot is mankind. I don't like that word. It's humankind. We're talking about all humans, right? All people. Humankind. It's not that hard. It's 2 extra letters, 1 extra syllable. You can do it. I believe in you. Words like policeman, fireman, postman, or like mailman, that's all men. It's implying that the only people who work for the police are men. The only people who fight fires are men. And so for a lot of these terms, we've started to see other options available, like police officer, firefighter, congressperson, chairperson, stuff like that. It's pretty simple to sort of switch that out in your speech, and I would encourage you to do that. Another thing is, like, sometimes people say man-made, and I get that man-made is easier to say than human-made or person-made or made by people, but I try to encourage people to avoid this sort of male centrism. Kind of like you guys, we assume that using the male as the default is gender neutral when it's not. It's like when people use he as the default pronoun. He isn't everyone's default pronoun. A lot of people use he or she, but I'm not really a fan of that either, and I know a lot of other people who aren't. My issue with it is that it's very binary. We have a lot of binaries in our language: men and women, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, mother and father. All of these things may exclude a lot of people. So if you're looking for a good way to refer to someone in the third person with an ambiguous gender pronoun, just use they. Maybe grammar prescriptivists will get mad at you, but who cares? Use they as a gender neutral option, or you could say one and be really formal about it. I also avoid saying men and women, boys and girls, stuff like that. I try and say people or kids instead of brothers and sisters, siblings instead of mother and father, parents. This also saves you from, like, maybe accidentally assuming that someone has a certain family structure that they don't have. Maybe someone has 2 moms. And yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know a good substitute for that. If you think of one, leave it in the comments, that'd be cool. Through all of this, though, one of my biggest issues with gendered language is when we use it negatively. So I'm sure many people, most of you watching this, have heard the phrase "like a girl," and not used in a good way. Oh, you throw like a girl, you run like a girl, you fight like a girl, blah, blah, blah. That's really not cool. That's like saying that, like, being compared to girls and women is an insult, which it's not. Girls and women are freaking awesome. And it's also implying that they're incompetent in any sort of physical activity. That, like, offends me from knowing women and girls who are good at things. If you want to say that someone, like, can't throw well, say, you can't throw well. You can be precise in your language like that without dragging gender into it. Also, people will ask, like, queer couples in, like, a same-sex relationship, "Oh, who's the man?" Well, you know what? Neither of us are the men, or both of us are the men. Like, what does that even mean? There are all these gendered assumptions that come with, like, oh, well, the man is dominant, the man pays for things. Are you asking who is the dominant partner in the relationship? Are you asking who gives more gifts to whom? Are you asking who talks most? Are you asking who is more of, like, the emotional support for the group? If that's what you're asking, freaking ask that. Saying who's the man, you're coming in with all these, like, loaded connotations there that, one, may not mean the same thing for everybody, and 2, are kind of offensive for people who identify as men and don't have those qualities, or who don't identify as men and do have those qualities. Like, why? One last thing I want to talk about, and it's kind of hard for me to put into words, is when people talk about men and women, and they'll say, oh, men do this thing, or men like this thing, or women like this thing. They're really only talking about cis men, or cis women. They're not including trans people in that category. They're not. Like, maybe a few people are, but for the most part, when people talk about men and women doing things, they're talking about cis men and women, which excludes trans people from this conversation. I don't know. I don't know what to do about that. I'm just pointing it out because it's a thing. So, yeah, thanks for listening to all that. Maybe you think I'm being a little fussy about this. Maybe you think I care too much. I do think, though, that the way we talk influences the way we perceive others, and or is influenced by the way we perceive others. I find that changing the way I speak changes the way I interact with other people. That said, I also recognize that a lot of what we say, like, we're not really aware of it. We grew up with these terms. For me, it's you guys. I grew up with that. It can be hard work to change your language, but I personally think it's worth it, and it's been worth it for me. So I'd encourage you to do that. If you think of any other gendered phrases or words that you just have noticed, go ahead and leave them in the comments, because I certainly didn't cover everything. Have a great week.